Well, hello, everyone. Once again, thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time listening to one of our podcasts, I really appreciate it. If this is a second or more, that's great. Please spread the word. As always, I'm Steve Taylor, the founder and lead advisor over here at Merited Wealth. And we have had different versions of our podcast and our YouTube videos over the last few months. And now I'm really trying to do something a little differently. It's a topic which I'm very passionate about. It's a topic which I'm currently going through, and I know a lot of those out there that might be listening. You're going through it, or you may be going through it here in the near future. And so, we've developed this series about college, right? About saving for college, about applying for college, about paying for college. And this whole series for those out there that hopefully, if you have children or grandchildren, whatever they might be, that we could, give you a few words of wisdom about some of the things that we've gone through, something as professionals that we understand. And we hope you find this helpful. And so today's podcast, I'm very, very honored to have someone I've got to know who's helped us out really great. And he's really known around town for the wonderful work he does. But Ken, why don't you give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do?
Morning. Thanks, Steve. My name's Ken Spiegelman. I am the president of a company called MPT College Consulting and also a company called Miami Private Tutors. I'm an educator in South Florida, and in addition to doing that, around 10 or 11 years ago, I started doing college consulting work with a focus on the holistic aspect of the student. Everything we do is one-on-one tailored to work with each individual child. We work with them on developing their resume towards college. We help them with whatever tutoring they might need when they are in school. We help them with the development of ideas for the essay, construction of the essay, editing the essay. And by essay, it's plural because there's the main essay in addition to all the supplementals. We help them build their college applications, their college list, help them through the process, including work on things like assistance with preparation for interviews. And in addition, if a child or if a student is deferred from a school, we will help them with deferment packages and then ultimately work with them and their parents in the final decision of what the best college is for them of the list of schools that they have been accepted to.
Excellent, Ken. Yeah, and we were really lucky, our family, to find you. And I would say we had a very successful outcome for our son Jaden. Right, I felt really nervous about the process because I'm such a crazy Florida Gator, and you helped us. You're instrumental in getting us there, and we all couldn't be happier. He would joke that I was happier than him, which is probably correct for many reasons. But
he's a great kid. He's a great kid, and by the way, he's a prime example of when you're cooking with good ingredients, the job is can be very, very rewarding, and Jaden is definitely good ingredients.
So. Thanks, Ken. Yeah, he's a great kid. So Ken, let's start at the beginning, right? It's always a good place to start. So you're a parent, you have a child, they're pretty much, I think they may be starting high school or whatever they might be, the first couple of years. When is a good time for a parent to kind of reach out to you, or when does the process start, in your opinion, to start thinking about the college application process to where, that's really, optimal for everyone involved?
So the quickest and easiest answer is the earlier the better. For some families, that might be 11th grade. For some families, it might be 9th grade. It depends. It depends what it is that the family is looking for. Do they already have their standardized testing scores in place? If so, 11th grade might be time to hire a college counselor. Do they have a child who they know is going to need a lot of guidance through high school with course selection and with assistance on AP exams or state mandated standardized testing? Do they know they're going to need help with SAT/ACT? In that case, 9th or 10th grade may be a better time to hire. Although I will tell you, I have had clients who have waited until 12th grade to hire me. In any event, we help them get the job done, but the planning is always very specific to the child and to the family and what their wants, needs, and expectations are.
Yeah, I see, Ken, and I believe this was somewhat your role before when you were in school. What role does the college counselor that high schools offer? How should parents view that? I mean, I know every counselor, I'm sure, is not the same, but some might think that's more than enough that they need, or they don't need anything else. What role do those individuals at the schools play in this process?
You're talking specifically about like the CAP advisor within a school, the college advising and planning person, the one who works at the school, correct?
I that's belief, so, but tell me if
Okay,
there's more people. Let me know.
sure.
Educate me on that also. Yeah.
Yeah, so different schools approach things differently. So public schools will have somebody called a CAP advisor, CAP. That person is going to be responsible for every single person in the senior class. They're going to be responsible for helping them make sure that their applications are completed. And to a large extent, the amount of time that that person can spend with the child depends on how many seniors they have to work with. Um, some schools will have 200 seniors. Some schools could have 700 to 1,000 seniors, and this person has to work with all of them. So then the question becomes, who's really helping the student dive into the essay? And I really should say essays plural, because most children are applying to schools that have more than just what we call the Common App essay. They also have supplemental essays. The primary role, as I see it, of the CAP advisor within the school is to help facilitate things like transcripts, making sure letters of recommendation have gotten out. In other words, the formalities and the procedures of the application.
Mhm.
But the day-to-day substantive nuts and bolts of preparing an application, that's where I come in, right? I'm going to give them, 5 to 7 days a week of help, myself and the people who work with me on making sure their essays are developed. The CAP advisor at the school is going to be available during school hours, and that's it. And it's going to be by appointment. There's not going to be the back and forth on, Google Docs or whatever other platform you're using to help write and edit essays with a CAP advisor. The CAP advisor is going to expect that a lot of things are done outside. Now, with respect to private schools, some of the private schools will call this same person the CAP advisor. They may use other titles. It might just be college counselor. It might be guidance counselor, but the same thing. They're just going to probably be working with a smaller group of people. And one of the things I see oftentimes when I do the private counseling work is that while I try to guide kids towards schools that I think are going to work for them in the application process, um, I never overly recommend schools. In other words, I'm not trying to direct them to, you have to apply to XYZ. It's more, you should think about applying to XYZ to make sure that we are protecting you and that you're reaching where appropriate. My agenda is help my students succeed. I think that sometimes the people within the school may have different agendas. Positive as they may be, their agendas are a little bit different, and they have a larger block of students all under the same umbrella that they are trying to help, whereas I'm strictly sticking to helping my clients.
Yeah, I remember, Ken, when we went through the process with you, I vividly remember you, trying to get to know us, trying to get to know Jaden, and you used the term like, do you want to go to a rah-rah school, right? And you meant by that really big in sports and all that involvement. And that was us. That's Jaden. He's just like me, and so that was a big part of it. So yeah, that was really great to tailor that. And so Ken, I remember, when we first sat down also, that Jaden was a little older, and you were kind of going through like, okay, what are we working with here? Like, how do we translate your son or daughter and we put them on paper? So, even before, let's say they come to you or the other, college counselor, you always hear about extracurriculars and activities, right? That this is the stuff that the colleges are looking for. What is your thoughts and what is kind of your recommendations there on, to what they should be thinking about as they're going through their years in school? Is there such a thing as too many activities or too few activities, or what is your thoughts there on what these families and these kids should be thinking about when to those extracurriculars for their application?
So I think I think there's a two-part answer to that. One, you only get to be a teenager once. And you only get to go through high school once. And high school should be enjoyable, and they should have fun, and they should grow as young people and enjoy themselves. But along that path, there's no reason that they shouldn't develop a meaningful resume. I am a big believer in depth over breadth. In other words, it's okay to be the recording secretary of 10 different clubs, but wouldn't it be more impactful to be deeply involved in 2 or 3 clubs and really show that you have gotten deeply engaged in those clubs and taken on real significant leadership. I would never tell a student that I'm working with, don't pursue the thing that you're most passionate about. Continue with the thing that you're most passionate about. But let's also find ways to make sure that that's meaningful for colleges, because the college application process is complex. The application itself is complex. We need to make sure that we present, let's just use Jaden as an example, the very best version of Jaden when he applies to college. How do we do that on paper? So it's about articulating the things that he's involved with in an order that impresses. It's making sure that he's involved in a variety of things. But I don't like to see kids who are overprogrammed, right? I want them to still think back fondly on high school that, yeah, if they loved doing X, make sure to find time in their life to do X, because a happy student will portray themselves that way as well in their application. And I think that's what colleges are looking for. Also, we want to make sure we build in community service. It's very important. I think there's a tendency sometimes for students to focus just on the number of hours. I have 800 hours of this. I have 700 hours of this. While the number of hours is important and it can certainly link to specific scholarship opportunities, it's more important, in my mind, applying to college, that the activity itself be meaningful. There are plenty of ways for kids to accumulate hours, but have they done something that they have become deeply engaged in? Have they done something that they themselves help orchestrate? Because if they do that, that looks even more impressive, I think, as they're applying to college. And it needs to be meaningful to them. And sometimes, in all candor, Steve, what's meaningful to the student might be different than what's meaningful to the parents. So we have to balance that conversation as we develop that holistic picture of the child.
That's great advice, Ken. I love it. Depth versus breadth. And yeah, I know a lot of parents can get involved, overly involved, but I think that's a great, great thought there as well, that the kid, if there's something they're passionate about and something they've chosen, they're going to go further. They're going to do better, right? If they feel like they're forced into it, that will show, right? And that's, I think that's another, a great thoughts and great advice there as well. And so, so the kids are in high school, they're matriculating through, right? And they're maybe in their sophomore year. I think they maybe take the practice exams of the national exams, and junior year, you get more into it. So here we are, Ken, in 2023, right? The world changed dramatically in 2020, right?
Yes, sir.
Things became test optional, right? And schools and applications and stuff like that. Speak to, if you can, what you view as the current state of the test, right? I don't know if you'd ever recommend to someone, don't take one, right? Or don't submit scores, and maybe one test versus the other. What's your thoughts and typically, your recommendations and advice regarding the tests?
Okay, so let's start with, there are 2 main tests, SAT and ACT. The SAT is going to go through a major revision in March of 2024. I believe that's the first year, or the first test where the redesign will be. That's going to be a computer-based test with a different structure. So as they're considering whoever's going to help them prepare, it's going to be really important that they hire tutors who understand what the redesigned test is going to look like. ACT is not going through that. Now, test optional versus non-test optional. The starting point is, where are you thinking about applying? Because if you're applying to a Florida State University, FSU, UF, et cetera, UCF, FIU, or a Georgia State University, University of Georgia, Georgia State, or Georgia Tech, which is a public university in Georgia, or a school like Georgetown or MIT, those schools all require SATs. The Florida universities never went away, or SATs or ACTs. The Florida universities never went away from it. The other schools are starting to come back. I have read that the Pennsylvania state universities, like Penn State, et cetera, are going to be going back to requiring testing. So it's important that you understand, when will the child be applying to college? Are they the senior class of 24 or the senior class of 25? Because every year things are changing. What I do with my clients is I insist that they prep for and they take the SAT and or ACT. And we work very hard with our tutors to try to direct the kids to the test that will work best for them. I have parents who will often ask me, does this school prefer this test or that test? The answer is no, there is no preference for one over the other. Whichever one you're best at is the preference. So in Jaden's case, I don't remember. It might have been ACT, it might have been SAT, but whatever it was, we worked both, and he ended up using the one that was best for him. With the Florida universities in particular, we want to pay attention to the number, right? This past year, the government in Tallahassee increased the number for Fulbright futures from 1330 on the SAT to 1340. It's still 29 on the ACT. So we work to make sure, because many of our clients will have Florida prepaid or something like that, and they want to make sure they're sticking within the state of Florida. We want to make sure they're picking up their Bright futures. In terms of, do I recommend optional or not? Assuming it is a school that is, for example, the University of Miami, that is test optional. What does test optional mean? It means exactly what it says. There is no preference at the college. If you have excellent grades, if you don't present with a test score, you don't present with a test score. If you have a good test score, it's another piece of that holistic puzzle. If the student has fantastic grades and is aiming for high universities, for example, I had several clients last year accepted to the University of Michigan, some of them with test scores, some of them without test scores. What all of them had in common was excellent transcripts, excellent resumes, and fantastic essays. What they didn't have in common is that some had really good scores and some did not. But the ones who did not, we did not use test scores, and they still had success with University of Michigan. So it's a case-by-case, student-by-student approach. That's how we work towards the application.
Really interesting, Ken. And real briefly, you said, I guess certain students may be better, more adept, or score better at SAT over ACT. Real briefly, what's the difference there? I don't really recall that.
So the design of the test is a little bit different. And again, what I'm going to tell you right now is the SAT as it stands right now, which will be, through the fall. There's a reading comprehension section. There is a writing section, which back in our day, Steve, we would have just called grammar, but now it's called writing. That's a short section. And then there's two math sections. There's a math without calculator and a math with calculator. And that leads to 2 scores out of 800, one for reading and writing combined and one for math. Now, students can superscore, which means they can take their best reading writing score from one test and their best math score from another test and combine them. But they should be aware that there are some colleges that are going to insist on seeing all scores, even if you're super scoring, and that's a conversation I can have, with them as we proceed. The ACT is a 4-section test. It opens with English. Again, it's what we classically would have thought of as grammar, but it's also writing style. The difference there is that on the SAT, it's a really short section, whereas on the ACT, it's 75 questions for grammar. Then it's 60 questions of math. And the big distinction, I think, between the math on the SAT and the math on the ACT is that the math on the ACT, it's 60 questions in 60 minutes. The questions get progressively more difficult as they move along. Kids will typically think of it as, okay, I have to do this on the first 30, and then the second 30 is really the bread and butter of where it gets tough. The SAT math problems tend to be more word-based problems, whereas the ACT tend to be more of the kind of classic math formula math problems that we think about. ACT also has reading. The reading on the ACT and the SAT, it's not that they're interchangeable, but they sort of work the same way, passage questions. And then the ACT has one additional section called science, which is not really science so much as it is a form of data-driven reading comprehension. SAT, in an effort to try to match that, made one of their reading comprehension passages a science passage. Now, that could mean, here's 2 sections about dinosaurs, let's talk about it. Or it could be, here's data sets about how the boiling point of different chemicals. And now let's interpret the data. The science is not science in that the children will not be asked to figure out the molecular weight of something based on a formula. It's about analyzing data patterns, and trends. So the ACT is a 4-section test, each section scored out of 36, combined then average score out of 36. The SAT reading and writing is 800. The 2 maths combined make 800. You combine that for your total score out of 1600. But again, there'll be some changes coming in March that we can talk about, later. Let's kind of stick to what's going to happen in the fall right now.
Yeah, really interesting. That's fascinating. Thanks a lot, Ken. I hope, I had no idea how that
Mm-hmm.
works. I don't remember taking the exams that Jane didn't tell me. So I hope those that are listening find that really, really helpful. I found that very interesting. So Ken, we're in school. We've taken our exams, we're in now entering senior year, right? I believe it's fall of senior year, the
Yes.
applications are going in. Can you talk a little bit about what you see these kids like, about how many schools you see them applying to? You spoke briefly before. Maybe you talk about again the Common App versus non-Common App schools and stuff like that, and kind of what you see and the actual application process.
Sure. So we will start working with our rising seniors around March or April of their junior year on their main essay. The goal being that by the time the senior year starts, the main essay is just about done. One of the things that we offer is that I have some English teachers that work with me who will give it the final once over at the end to check for grammar, et cetera. But I always tell students, please don't be alarmed. If you have an inadvertent comma splice, right, or you accidentally misspell one word, that is not the sort of thing that's going to make a college decide yay or nay. If your essay is full of grammar errors and full of spelling errors, then yes, you're giving them an opportunity to say nay. The common application is open for them all the time. It's just that the college section of the common application doesn't really open for them until August. And for some schools, maybe not even till like the beginning of September. So the goal is, as we approach the start of senior year, we have finished all the background, all the demographic information, everything, all their activity stuff, that's all in. When school starts, we will start working on the supplemental questions, the questions that relate to specific colleges. If it's a University of Florida, let's make sure we're addressing theirs. If it's Florida State, let's make sure the resume is all buttoned up because they're going to want the resume. If it's Michigan, let's make sure we've worked on their supplementals. Most colleges now are on the common application. There are some colleges like the University of California colleges that use their own application platform. That actually doesn't even open until beginning of October, and then the applications have to be filed by November 30th. So one of the things that I'm doing with my clients is we spreadsheet everything for them so that they know what their deadlines are. And it's color coded and it's schemed so that mom and dad and the student are always aware this is what's coming up and this is when it's due. And we always target trying to get things filed a couple of weeks before deadline. The reason being, there are some schools out there like Texas, for example, where the due date is not just a due date, it's a completion date, meaning that the application has to be in and all material needed to support the application, including letters of recommendation and transcripts and test scores, if you're using them, have to be there by that date. So we want to make sure that we're meeting that. So one of the things that I do as an independent college counselor is I'm reminding parents and the student, hey, listen, you're applying to University of Michigan. You need to be talking to your recommenders at your school to make sure that they have submitted your letters of recommendation. Let's file the application 2 weeks before the deadline to give your school enough time to get the transcript in. That process has gotten a little bit easier on the school side because of programs like SCORE and Naviance, which are sort of the intermediary between the Common App and the university. It's like almost like a clearinghouse platform. Mm-hmm. But even still, we want to make sure these things are done, because what you don't want to see happen is the child applies to the school on time. The child does everything they have needed to do on time, but their school has not sent their transcript, or a teacher has not sent a letter of recommendation, and they had presumed they would be in the early applicant pool, and now they're in the regular applicant pool. And the data's out there. If you want to have your best chance at schools, you want to meet those early application deadlines. I do everything on my side that I possibly can, but there are limitations. I can't control what happens within the school. Sometimes that's going to require mom or dad to walk over to the school if it's a private school, or pick up the phone and call an assistant principal if it's a public school, saying, hey, Johnny, Mary, they've done their job. I need you to do yours, push the button and get the paperwork sent.
Yeah, that's great. And Ken, is there any thoughts on kind of a maximum number of schools? Or I know some kids might just do one or two. I don't know. Do the schools see how many other schools you apply to, stuff like that?
So that's a two-part question. Let's deal with the second part first. If you apply for financial aid through FAFSA, schools will see the schools that you have applied to. Some schools will ask on the Common App, where else are you applying? It's up to the student whether or not to disclose that. I just tell them it's there. You have to make a decision on whether or not you're going to disclose that. In terms of the number of applications, the national average every year tends to be somewhere between 4 and 7. That number is a little bit misleading, though, because for a lot of reasons, there are a lot of students who will only apply to 1 or 2 universities. They need to stay at home. They're going to commute, etc. There are students out there who will apply to 15, 20, 25 universities. That obviously seems to be a bit excessive to me. Where do you know what you want? My company's policy is we will work with you on up to 10 applications. Beyond 10, there's an additional fee associated.
Yeah.
The goal is let's take that list and let's make sure the list is kind of a third, a third, a third. I will never use the word safe for a college because I don't know that anything is particularly safe anymore. What I'll say is target. In other words, 3 or 4 of the schools on your list, I'm pretty comfortable you're getting in with an understanding, with a caveat that there are no guarantees. 2 or 3 of the schools, maybe 3 or 4, let's reach. You're telling me you want to go for Stanford. If you've got the grades for it, scores if you're going to use them, etc., let's go for it. And the other third, the 2, 3, 4 are in the middle, could go either way. Because at the end, when all the numbers, when all the answers come in, I want the students to have choices. And I want everything that's on their list of their final choices, meaning they have gotten in, to be schools that they're comfortable and that their parents are comfortable that, okay, maybe I didn't get my number 1, I got my number 2, 3, or 4. I'll also say this, Steve. I've been doing this for over 10 years. The vast majority of my clients, and by vast majority, it's well over 90%. Where they go, they're happy. Mm-hmm. We tend to land where we are supposed to be. Yes, everybody would love to go to University of Florida or Florida State, but that doesn't happen for everybody. So maybe they would have loved to have gone to Florida, they go to Florida State, or they would have loved to have gone to Florida State and they go to Florida. They're still happy, right? They would have loved to have gone to BC, but they go to BU and they're happy. And I don't say that to tier the schools, that this school is better than this school or that, because that's not how I look at this. The school should be the best school for the child, right? Not based on what a magazine is saying is these schools are more highly ranked or these schools are more highly ranked, because Steve, you've been in the business world a long time. Where you go to college and what you do is as much about what you make of college, the people you meet, the network you build, and those are the people that will assist you as you go through life. I went to a very, very small college in Pennsylvania for undergraduate, and I loved it. That kind of school is not for everybody. A lot of my, some of my kids my own personal kids have gone to Florida or Florida State. They've all loved their experiences, but everybody's experience has to be unique for them.
Yeah, I love that, Ken. And I remember actually when I was coming out of high school, I was being recruited to play basketball, and I'll never forget at a school. I had pretty good academic grades, and this coach knew it, and he said, I was looking at different schools maybe that were more exclusive to get into, and he's like, "Hey, Steve," and really no truer words were ever uttered to me. He's like, "Listen, an education is whatever you make of it. You can go to freaking Harvard and slack, or you can go to Joe Schmo and work your butt off, right? What it is, what you make of it." And I also appreciate, Ken, your advice to say, we're not going to limit you, but over 10, we're charging more, right? So you're kind of telling them, hey, listen, that's really what we're kind of recommending. That's kind of your the maximum you should be focused on. And I love how you tier those. So Ken, help me out with this, because this is something we did not do as a family, and I really don't understand it. Can you explain a little bit the process of early decision, right? That if you apply to this school, you kind of have to go there. I mean, what does that even mean, right? How do they force you to that? What's that process? Because I hear a lot of people are trying to are doing that, and that's something we didn't do.
So Jaden, as an example, Jaden really wanted University of Florida. Thankfully, that worked out. Florida does not offer early decision. In fact, it's unusual for a state school to offer early decision. The 2 most common application methods, if you're applying by November, although be aware, like Florida State now is October 15th, and that's for Florida residents only. It's called Florida Early Action. The 2 most common application methods are early action and early decision. And without being glib, the way I explain it to people is Early action is asking somebody to have dinner with you, right? I like you. I'm interested in getting to know you more, but I'm not making a commitment that we're going to go out a second time. So you apply early action to a school. You apply, let's use November 1st because that's most early actions. But whether you're working with me or somebody else, you need to pay attention to your deadlines. Common App will help you with that. They'll show you your deadlines. But let's assume it's a school like Northeastern. Okay, Northeastern's a good example. You can apply early action or early decision to Northeastern. If you apply early action to Northeastern and you get in, you do not have to go there. If you apply early decision, you haven't asked the school to go to dinner. You've asked the school to marry you. And if they say yes, you're getting married. So if you apply early decision and you get in, you are committed to going there. That is where you have made a contract. That is where you're going. And there are very specific rules in the common application and on SCORE or Naviance or whatever program your school is using that you can only apply early decision to one school. And when you get in, you have to pull your other applications. You can't say, well, okay, I got in early decision to Duke. I still want to know if I got into UF, which is going to come out like late February, whereas Duke early decision is going to come out sometime in December. You don't want to be a collector, right? If you've been accepted early decision, congratulations, good, you're ready to go. You need to be aware, though, particularly as parents, if you're accepted early decision, now you have a commitment, and it's a financial commitment as well. So if your application itself is going to be contingent on requisite financial aid, and I don't give financial aid advice, but you do need to check the box that you're asking for financial aid, because then you can continue to have a conversation with the school. Okay, you've accepted my child early decision. You've offered me X. We need more. And if they can't, then there are ways you can move to kind of pull back from the early decision. There is one other type of application out there. It's called restrictive early action, REA, the kids will refer to it as. There are very few schools that offer that. Some of the Ivies, Stanford, Notre Dame. How that works is they will allow you to apply early if you say you're applying restrictive early action to Stanford, you can apply early action to state schools, Michigan, Florida, etc. But you can't apply early action to private universities like Northeastern. If you get in, if you're fortunate enough to get into Stanford, you're not bound because it was an early action, not an early decision. So one of the first things you should be doing when you're preparing your college list, whether it's with me or on your own or with your school advisor, is you should look and see what their application alternatives are, because not every school offers early action. Those that do, I highly recommend my clients take advantage of early action for two reasons. Number one, I think that they tend to fill more of their applicant pool out of their early actions. And number two, you get some certainty in your application process knowing earlier. The truth is, most kids will know their answer by late February when the bulk of their state schools have come in, although some will be a little bit later if they're waiting on regular decisions. If you're applying, there is another system called Early Decision 2, which generally will have a January deadline. So let's just use two hypothetical schools. Student A applies early decision 1 to Tulane through November 1st. They don't get in, or they get deferred. They said, well, I had BU as a close second. I'm going to go early decision 2 to BU. If they get into BU, they're bound to BU. Okay?
Would you submit the early decision 2 to BU after you hear from Tulane?
That's my recommendation, and simply for financial reasons.
Yeah.
Have the application ready. The essays are written, everything is loaded in the Common App, but why spend the extra money to submit? You know, you may only be talking about $100 here or there, but it's still your money. It's not my money. And when I have students who apply early decision, the only schools I make sure that they file are early action schools, which are due November 1st. For example, if I have a student that I'm working with that has applied early decision, say to Penn, I still have them submit their Georgia Tech application, their University of Florida application, because I know that those schools will fill up from their early actions. If they get into Penn, congratulations, pull your other applications, right? But we don't want them to miss an application deadline. But if it's a situation where, Johnny applied to Tulane ED, didn't get in, the BU application's ready to roll in ED2. All they have to do is go into the Common App with their credit card, click a button, it's out. They don't have to worry about it anymore.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's really helpful, Ken.
Mhm.
And finally here, I'd like to ask about, so the hopefully the acceptances, right, start to roll in. In our situation, we had an acceptance, a couple of different acceptances. Then we got Florida, which was the big one for me. And my son was still waiting on Michigan, right? And kind of what to do there. And we made that decision. I'm like, come on, Jaden, who cares if you got into Michigan or not, right? This is where we want it to go. But for other families, I guess it might not be that clear cut, right? When you rank those schools, maybe your priorities, maybe two that you equally weighted. You've heard from one and you haven't heard from the other. What's kind of like the best recommendation there about, because I remember going through this. We got the acceptance, and then I think we initially had to make some sort of payment, and then shortly thereafter, especially at Florida, it's a big issue about student housing, right? We had to make a dorm deposit and stuff like that. What's your recommendation when they start hearing and they've heard from one that they like? It's not early decision or anything, or early action or any of those, and they're still waiting on another one that's really close by. What's your thought process there on kind of how to handle that time period?
Patience can be a remarkably challenging thing in the college application process, right? So what'll happen is students apply to a whole bunch of different schools, and some schools are rolling and they'll find out pretty early. And then you'll have a situation where they get into a school that may be their number one or their number two. They can keep their other applications open until the moment that they make a tuition deposit. Once you make a tuition deposit, you have reached a deal. You have an accord. The other applications need to be pulled. Now, the exception to that is if you have been waitlisted at a school, and that's a key word here, the word waitlist, right? Defer. You've applied early action to a school. They have deferred you, meaning we don't know when we're going to tell you, okay? But if you accept an admission offer from a school, you are supposed to cancel the deferments and let them know, I am no longer interested. If you have been waitlisted, you can leave the waitlist open with the understanding that if you later get in, so let's just use a hypothetical student who has been accepted to the University of Florida, who was deferred from the University of Michigan, okay? If they pay their tuition deposit at the University of Florida, they are supposed to cancel their application with the University of Michigan. However, if before they pay their tuition deposit to the University of Florida, the University of Michigan tells them, you are now on our wait list, okay? They can keep the wait list open. If they get a call or an email or a letter from Michigan sometime over the summer, congratulations, you're coming off the wait list. We have a spot for you. They can take that. They have to notify Florida, Florida State, Indiana, wherever it was that they were going, and they're going to lose their tuition deposit, and they're going to lose their housing deposit. And that's a family conversation. And that's true in undergrad and grad school as well. You can do that from waitlist, right? Mm-hmm. But once you commit to a school, you are supposed to pull open applications. The other thing you should do, because it's fair to other students, is if my son gets accepted to the University of Florida and he says to Florida, I'm coming, here's my tuition deposit, you're supposed to notify all the other colleges you were accepted to, I'm not coming. And you have to think about this almost in the context of karma, right? There are kids out there who are waiting. They've been deferred. They're on wait list. And the spots are being held by kids who haven't yet decided if they're going or not going. You need to pull it. Colleges actually make it pretty easy to do that. Some of the platforms, like I can think one off the top of my head, UCF, literally you can go onto your student portal and you'll have your offer of admission there and it will say accept or deny. Click deny, it's over. No harm, right? Colleges don't take this stuff personally. It's business. Some of them you actually have to send an email to your admissions person saying, hey, thank you so much for the offer. I've decided to enroll in another college. And again, they don't keep a list of, well, we really wanted Jaden and now he said no, so let's keep Jaden in mind. It's not how it works. This is business.
Yeah. Yeah, this is awesome, Ken. This has been really, really awesome. I've been through it and I knew some of this. You've educated me on a lot. We have another one coming through. And so, this is really, really helpful and thought, to understand and explain that process, how it's going to be for him. So Ken, listen, this has been awesome, man. I really, really appreciate your time. For those that have listened, I hope they really got something out of this. We're going to put all your information. It's going to be out there on the show notes for the podcast out there on YouTube and everything, and they'll be able to get in touch with you. But this has been great. This has been really great, Ken. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Steve. Please send Jada my best. Tell him I miss him.
I will, buddy.